Ali and Mrs. Anna Aruhu Ali, who believe so much in girl child education. I also wish to thank my primary and secondary school teachers who prepared me academically and otherwise for the future. Vice Chancellor, sir, I will not fail to mention my sojourn at the University of Ife as an undergraduate. University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University. I want to specially appreciate my lecturers, and in particular, Professor Adebisi Afolayan, who celebrated his 98th year this year and then left. So he left just about 2 weeks ago. He was a caring father to all students. At Ife, I blossomed academically and otherwise, and in the process, I received the National Merit Award, a scholarship that is reserved for the best 6 students in the Faculty of Arts, and graduated in 1979 with second-class honors upper. I wish to pay special tribute to my supervisor, Professor Envy Smith, also of blessed memory, who convinced me to study linguistics instead of English grammar. He wrote a grammar of Nupe, and he encouraged me to work on Esan, my language, as there were no written materials on it. My deepest regard is reserved for my family, especially my loving husband of 46 years. We've been through a lot together. My noble brother, Sir Professor Ekeikhomen Adebayo Ejele. I also appreciate my children and their spouses. Most of them are not here, but we're in touch. I hope they are participating or looking at this. Engineer Akome Himari and his wife, Dr. Ejele Ni Iwawo, Dr. Osezwa Irabo and his wife, Jennifer Ejele Ni Obeto, Mr. Vincent Damian and Dr. Ilobekeme Enivie Akiyame Ni Ejele, my only daughter, and my only son-in-law, and our last born, Obede Aidinomo Ejele, and all our grandchildren. As a preamble, sir, Vice Chancellor, sir, permit me to give some relevant information before I commence this inaugural lecture. It's interesting how I ended up a linguist, because while growing up, I never heard of linguistics, but a series of events led me down this path. In my secondary school, I was good in both arts and science. However, I fell ill in my final year and I had to go home. Returning to school just to take the West African examination, I was advised to defer it, but I opted to do it and ended up with grade 2 at grade 24. That was in 1971. After my school set, I went to do higher school certificate in Government College, Ejele. Even at that stage, I had toyed with the idea of doing medicine, but I couldn't stand so many things, like having to kill a beautiful white rabbit. I was asked to dissect it, and I refused to do it. A few other things. Yes, I couldn't study blood. I couldn't play with spit. I didn't partake in the experiments. I could not stand the smell of medicines, not to talk of poo and vomit, even till today. So, same thing for physics. I had my problems with all of them. From science. After HSC, I worked for a while, 2 years, in the Public Service Commission, Benin City. Thank you. I went to Ife. I was admitted to read English at Ife, and studying there was an interesting time. After that, I went to UCL, University of London, for postgraduate studies. And the then head of department, who turned out to be my supervisor, advised me to study linguistics. and encouraged me to blaze the trail, working on Esan, a Nigerian language that had not been studied. So I went through the whole hog and did the PGD, master's, PhD, and both projects. I had the privilege of having both my MA dissertation and the PhD thesis supervised by him. Interestingly, my MA dissertation, which established the phonemes of Esan, provided the basis of the alphabet that formed the foundation of the Esan orthography. So right from that period, my research work focused, especially those two, the master's dissertation and doctoral thesis, served as trailblazers and set the tone for my future research work. In fact, both works are now reference material on the Esan language, which was first documented in these important academic works. I was recruited from UK as lecturer 2 by University of Benin, and when I returned, I worked there 2 years, moved to Calabar, worked another 2 years, and finally settled at the University of Port Harcourt in 1990 till date. And over the years, my research work has covered formal linguistic issues across phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, basically using data from the Esan language. I've also worked on communication, pragmatics, and discourse analysis as aspects of meaning beyond sentence meaning. My enduring quest for knowledge this time about meaning in general has taken me beyond semantics, interface relations, and other areas, and has culminated in the publication of my latest book entitled The Study of Meaning, Sentence Meaning Beyond Linguistics. This is published in Adult, Joseph, and Pragmatics, forthcoming. Our languages, taking stock. I'll just give a bird's eye view before I delve into it. Languages and culture, then current status of indigenous languages. And the fourth session, we'll look at the challenges and prospects of keeping indigenous languages alive. And then this will be followed by recommendations. And finally, we'll have our concluding remarks. So that's the, or lose it. I think that summarizes what we are here for today. It's something we should all go back home with. Either you use it or you lose it. So, many people, stakeholders, linguists, governments, language enthusiasts, they've been very interested in language and be worried about the future, given the daunting challenges about the use and survival of our languages. So this topic has bothered me for a long time, both as a linguist and as a native speaker of my language. And I know that many of us have the same worries. So we need to know some basic facts about languages. For instance, what happens when languages come in contact, the situation of multilingualism, and then we'll look at an update on the language use and language situation in Nigeria. So you watch out. Every section provides information on the journey so far in terms of updates. So we look at local languages in Nigeria and their classification. Of course, Nigeria is known to be a complex, multilingual, multi-ethnic, multicultural country. In fact, it's the most complex in Africa and one of the most complex in the world. What about the number? The number is unknown. And so you find that we've had different figures bandied around. Hansford et al. In 1976 said 394. Grimes in 1992 said 478. Crozier and Blanche in 1992 said 500. And ethnologue in 2017 said 502. In fact, even in 2023, 500 was still being quoted, and 2024, Wikipedia put it at 525. Now, what's interesting about these languages, as far as Nigeria is concerned, is that only English, the language of our colonial masters, is designated official language. And three major languages, they are called major languages, Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba. They are constitutionally recognized by the 1999 Constitution as our national languages. And they are spoken predominantly, respectively, in the north, southeast, and southwest. There's a map there. See if you can locate your own there. I know the writing is very small, but just check if you can see your own there. Basis of classification of languages. Now, it's usually in the literature, scouting through the literature on classification of languages, they use population. Though some use population and development, some use dominance or power and numerical strength. So if we take the ones based on population of speakers, you see they are divided into major majority or minor minority. So you hear the expression major or majority and the expression minor or and minority. As I said, three of them were taken as major, and all the others were taken as belonging to the minor or minority group. Hausa is the lingua franca of the north, Igbo of the southeast, and Yoruba of the southwest. Now, there's also a redefinition of these languages into a tripartite division. And this was because of the arguments and uproar. People felt uncomfortable with their languages being referred to as minor or major. So Bangboche spearheaded this tripartite division into the major languages, the main languages, and the small group languages. The original major groups retained their label, and the others that had obtained recognition and status in newly created states were now elevated to be main languages. Examples are given there. There's also classification based on development. So some are said to be developed. The major languages are said to be developed because they have well-established orthographies, they have standard written varieties, they have long traditions of writing, and meta-languages. The main languages are considered developing. And what is their characteristics? They have recent traditions of writing, they have incipient standard varieties and a few literature, and they are used in the Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria network news in their respective states. I have listed some of them there. And then the small group languages are treated as undeveloped. What is their characteristics? Lack of orthographies, and no standardized orthographies, no standard varieties, and written literatures, and no meta-languages. Ejele 2003 actually made a case for underdeveloped languages to keep them separate from undeveloped. So the underdeveloped languages are those that have some form of orthographies. They have very few written literatures, whereas when you compare with the undeveloped ones, the undeveloped languages have no written literature, no orthography, no meta-language, and very little is known about them. The interesting thing is that many indigenous Nigerian languages fall into this category, and that's where the fear of endangerment and extinction which usually stand, because many of them have fewer than 500 speakers. It's also interesting to know that Federal Radio Corporation news in the different states is now being cast in many more languages, as I've exemplified there. So what's the update information on this session? The one, discussion on local Nigerian languages is still, discussions are still largely done in terms of whether it's minor or major languages. However, the issue of nomenclature is too small to distract us from the greater threat of language endangerment and possible extinction, which all indigenous languages are facing. In fact, if you look at Gary and Rubino in their work, they treated, that was in 2001, they treated major languages numerically as all languages spoken by 2 million or more people. All languages spoken by 2 million or more people. And by this criterion, 6 Nigerian languages qualify as major languages. That's Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba. Those are the ones we already know. Ibibio, Kanuri, and Fufude. By implication, any language with a population less than 2 million is considered minor and therefore is endangered. So be doing the calculation in your own, whether your language you are up to 2 million or not. As at 2021, Hausa is taken as the most widely spoken language in Nigeria by more than 48 million speakers, followed by Yoruba with 39.5, Nigerian Pidgin by 30, and Igbo by 27 million, Fufude by 22 million. Now, for us, what is important is that all indigenous Nigerian languages are facing the same threats of endangerment and extinction. It's only a matter of degree and time if nothing serious is done to stem the tide. So let's look at languages in contact. Now, there are 195 countries in the world with so many languages, but let's look at what language contact means. Language contact is a situation when speakers of different languages interact long enough for features of pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar to be transferred from the dominant language to the non-dominant one. So, of course, in the case of Nigeria, English is the dominant language, and of course, we know its position as the official language and the language used for almost every important sphere of our lives. In contrast, our indigenous languages are at best relegated to being used in the family and in the local government area. So ab initio is already disadvantaged, because if you don't need to use your language in your education, in financial, business, economic empowerment, diplomacy, all these things, then you may not pay it as much attention as you would pay English. And the same process takes place when the dominant indigenous languages come against the weaker main or small group languages. It's the same process. So a dominant dialect and a less used dialect. How has language contact affected Nigerian languages? Invariably, language contact leads to shifts, language shifts, language change, language endangerment, and finally, extinction. What is language shift? In fact, it is the beginning of language endangerment, because as speakers gradually shift from using their own language to using the dominant one, they begin to lose sight of their own, of the value of their language. And with time, their language gets dislodged and the speakers stop using it. They are shifted from their own to the dominant one. Language change may follow language shifts, and this happens when the speakers stop using their own language in communication or interaction among themselves, but use the dominant language. And when language shifts become stable, language change has taken place. See, this thing doesn't happen overnight. So you just suddenly realize that you are not speaking your language, you are speaking another. And so you may find two Igbos speaking Yoruba interacting, or two Esan people, they are speaking Yoruba. It's very common. So at this point, the language is definitely endangered. When people fail to trust the language of their children. More than 300 ethnic groups with distinct religions and regional differences. Okay. Now, many Nigerians are multilingual. They can speak at least two languages, their mother tongue and another one. Usually it's either English or Pidgin. Now, the interesting thing is that the past few years have witnessed the rising profile of Nigerian Pidgin, spoken as the lingua franca, especially for unofficial activities, being the dominant language of wider communication. In fact, Grimes, as far back as 1992, observed that 99% of Esan people in Edo State speak or understand Nigerian Pidgin. In Delta State, Nigerian Pidgin is not only dominant, but has creolized, or is in the process of creolizing, meaning it's the first language that the children speak instead of their mother tongue. So what's the update information on the use of Pidgin in Nigeria? One, the Pidgin is consolidating its position and functionality all over Nigeria. As at 2024, over 60 million people now speak Pidgin. Remember 2021, 30 million. 2024, 60 million. So we provide two lists showing the status of languages in the 36 states in Nigeria in terms of multilingualism and the number of languages attested and monolingualism. So if you look at the first one under 1.3.1, the multilingual states in Nigeria, you find that in fact that list is arranged in descending order, starting with the highest. So Cross River has the highest number of languages, 73. Abia has the least, 2. Interesting observations. You find that out of the 36 states, 28 are multilingual, showing that indeed the language situation in Nigeria is complex. Second observation, Hausa, the predominant language in Kano State, followed by Fufude. Now, the interesting thing is that there are 3 other spoken languages in Kano State, and usually we don't even remember that there are other spoken languages there. I've listed them there. The 3 are in Doguwa local government area. Third observation, of the 5 Igbo states, Enugu is multilingual, though predominantly Igbo. We find minorities of Idoma and Igala in Eteuno in Igweze North local government area. And similarly in Abia, Igbo is the predominant language, but you find a small number that speak Ibibio. Now, the case of Lagos is interesting. The predominant language is Yoruba. However, because of the cosmopolitan nature of the state, there are as many languages as ethnic groups that live and do business there, the highest being Igbo. People generally speak their own language among themselves, though they have also learned to speak Yoruba. And outside official activities, the most common language of communication interlingually is Nigerian Pidgin. So next we look at the monolingual states. You see that there are 8 of them, and they are all in southern Nigeria. Now, the interesting thing is that because Hausa is used as first or second language, the first impression is given of monolingualism in northern Nigeria, whereas Hausa is actually the language of wider communication. Okay, it's not as if Hausa is the first or second language. You find that it's just predominant there, and so you think that the whole of North is Hausa. So, second one, all the southern states are monolingual. They speak Yoruba, of course, with Lagos having the special status. Now, the complex linguistic situation in Nigeria ensures that English, that is spoken by more than half of our population, and of course having overwhelming international presence, continues to dominate our lives as the official language. Next, we look at steps taken to ensure survival of our indigenous languages, and culture. We see that government they are taking some sure adequate steps, but it's impossible for government alone to take care of all languages. So the owners also have to do something about keeping their languages alive by providing, first step, providing orthographies, and in terms of corpus planning and language planning and documentation. Some states, houses of assembly, use their languages, especially the 3 major languages. They sometimes use them for proceedings, but not in any serious manner. Okay, you find that even when they do, they are doing a lot of code mixing and code switching, and sometimes you find, if it's Igbo, you find that the English words are more than the Igbo words in one sentence. So I don't know how one can say that they are using their language. So keeping the language alive is an ongoing process that must be sustained, principally by the owners of the language. So next stage is how far have we gone with providing orthographies and standardizing indigenous languages. Okay, remember I said that providing orthography is the first step, one of the most important steps to take. First, reduce the language to writing, and then from there we take it up. Well, like the long ago, to provide writing systems for local Nigerian languages. And manuals were published from time to time over the years under different editors. Okay, and a number of languages have been worked on, okay, sponsored by National Language Center then in Lagos. But of course, National Language Center has since been absorbed into NERDC in Abuja. That's the National Educational Research and Development Council. I must say that federal government actually reached out to linguists to provide orthographies for Nigerian languages. This is how I was invited by the Federal Ministry of Education in Lagos while I was studying in England to write the orthography of ESA. And then I collaborated with the orthography committee back home. So I'll be doing illustrations from ESA language on which I have worked over the years. The population of ESA is about 1 million to 1.5 million people. That's the most recent one. So what's the current status of providing orthographies for indigenous languages? Now, you find that many language, as I said, many language groups have worked on their own. I worked on that of ESA, and I published a paper on that. We wrote it, I wrote with Okoje. Okoje was a representative of the ESA language committee, so we co-authored the paper. Now, similarly in Rivers State, the government set up Rivers Readers Committee with Professor Alagua as chairman and Professors K. Williamson and Otonte Nduka as members. And they did a lot of work encouraging mother tongue education. This effort went dominant for a while, and then it was revived as Rivers Readers Project under Rivers State Languages Development. And over the years, many orthographies have been produced. For instance, 9 cross-river languages have been reduced to writing, developed by linguists. But for some time now, some years, we haven't heard much about the manuals. In fact, the last manual on orthographies of Nigerian languages, Manual 9, was edited by our own Professor Ejele in 2011. And in 2012, orthographies of 14 Rivers State languages were approved, okay, and published. I've given them there. And so far, 17 out of 28 local languages in Rivers States have approved orthographies, according to CARI 2019. Now, many departments of linguistics in Nigerian languages have worked on many unknown local languages, especially those ones around them. And the libraries of these institutions are repositories where you find projects, master's and doctoral theses and dissertations supervised by linguists. And our own department is a very good example of this. A lot of work has been done. The Bible translation groups are also working on indigenous languages. But in spite of the enthusiasm, it's disappointing. It's quite unfortunate that the total number of orthographies of the languages out of the 500, we don't know how many have actually been reduced to writing by providing orthographies. So, of course, providing orthographies is a continuous exercise. At least let's continue working on them and let's see how many languages can be salvaged. Then, in addition to the work done by NERDC on orthographies of Nigerian languages, federal government established the National Institute for Nigerian Languages in 1992. And in 1993, NILAN, that's National Institute for Nigerian Languages, was set up as the apex institution to work on Nigerian languages. Of course, as with many government institutions, how well these objectives have been met is another matter, because funding has always been a challenge and not much has been achieved. I think it's the same crisis we are suffering everywhere, lack of funds. But the consolation, since government has stopped working on the orthographies of the languages, the owners of the languages should take up the gauntlets, as they are the direct beneficiaries and they will have a lot to lose. Since, of course, government cannot provide orthographies for all the 500 languages. So we look at corpus planning, how has that fared? Now, corpus planning has to do with the overall development of language for literacy and numeracy in its widest ramification. There are 4 processes that are involved: graphization, standardization, codification, and modernization. The first one, graphization, is partly, we can say it's partly successful, since some languages have orthographies and writing system developed for literacy. And this is the most important step if you want to reduce a language to writing. Reducing it to writing is a first step to saving that language. And the second stage is standardization, which involves selecting from among the dialects one variety of language that becomes the written form. Now, if I illustrate with Esan language, all the dialects in Esan language are mutually intelligible. So all speakers can key into the orthography provided by Okoji and Ejele. However, we know that the written form using the standard orthography does not stop any native speaker from using his own dialect. So people are encouraged to just use their language, whichever dialect you have. And it is expected that over time, the written form will influence the spoken form. But what we have noticed is that many of the indigenous languages, the speakers cannot really write their languages. They can only speak them. But speaking them, at least they are speaking them, and still alive. Now, after these 2 first stages, the next one is codification, the third stage in development of a language. Okay. This is a systematic organization and documentation of the facts as captured in the grammar, the spelling system, the dictionaries, counting system, meta-language, style manuals, and they generally serve as standard reference materials as to how to go about writing the language. Languages that don't have codification run the risk of being endangered or even going extinct. And again, many minority or small group languages are in this situation. I would also like to point out that publishing works with data drawn from indigenous languages at the different linguistic levels enhances codification in the language. And my numerous work over the years across the different levels of linguistics with data largely drawn from Esan are a testament. And you can see this in details of this in the main work and references. So codification is very important because the whole process of organizing and documenting depends heavily on how good the orthography is. We go on to language planning. This means taking deliberate steps to influence the function, structure, or acquisition of languages or their varieties within a speech community, and it is part of language policy. So if you look at language policy in Nigeria, the National Policy on Education contains the National Language Policy. There is no separate one. If you look at the document 1977, revised in 1981, 1998. So on update on that, well, I think of recent, government announced that the first language, mother tongues, can be used in the primary school level and pre-primary school level. So the problem now is that government has done its bit. It's for the people to take up that challenge and see how they can effect it in their different areas. Well, details of that, again, are in the work. Again, also in documentation. We go on and look at contribution of speakers to keeping their languages alive. You see that they have done a lot. Many people have written. In fact, I think it was yesterday's Vanguard. There was a very rich session on the Igbo language and the fear of losing it. Many people have been doing their bit. The same thing with keeping the cultures alive. Okay, UNESCO has drawn our attention to the fact that if you lose your language, your culture goes along with it, and everything goes. What is the current status of indigenous languages in Nigeria? There are endangered ones. UNESCO has given us a list of endangered ones. You see that under 3.1.1. And then those are the extinct ones. 3.12, you see the list of endangered languages. And then we look at challenges and prospects of keeping our local languages alive. There are many challenges. Okay? The details are in that work. But I just mentioned two, that English being the official language for everything is a challenge. The fact that Nigerian Pidgin has a better chance of surviving is another thing that is worrisome, because now 60 million Nigerians speak Pidgin, a figure that is higher than that of speakers of our native languages. So we need to do something about that. What are the prospects? Now, it's not as gloomy as painted in the picture. There are prospects. With increase in collaborations and partnerships among groups within Nigeria and in the diaspora, the future looks bright. Okay, so you find as Nigeria doing their own. Also, so short of sounding like a broken record, transgenerational transfer is the main key to reducing or slowing down or halting language extinction, because as long as there are speakers, language will stay and remain alive. It's actually better to have speakers, rather than people who just write it. Remember Latin. Latin was never really spoken. It was written. And today Latin is dead. I think it's only in the Catholic Church that Latin is used. So it's good to have speakers of the language, so we can have the language remain alive. As regards financial commitment, the collaboration with interested language groups is welcome, and we salute and encourage language groups, organizations, and the native speakers themselves to key into this vision so that we can all work together to save our languages. Use your language or lose it. The choice is yours. Thank you for listening.
You hand it over. Okay, this way. You pass through here, the front.
Let us put our hands together as the elder scholar, Professor Philomena Ejele, officially hand over the lecture to the acting vice chancellor of the university. Please, can we clap? Let's do well. He is a linguist par excellence. Phonetic. Please, I want to stop here. Let me the registrar.
The Draws Enlightening Inaugural Lecture Series number 193 to a close. I wish to express my profound gratitude to Professor Philomena Ejele for her compelling presentation titled Keeping the complexities of classification within our multilingual context, as highlighted by Professor Ejele, pose significant challenges to resource allocation and policy formulation. Consequently, while English holds the ground as the official as national languages, countless other languages
and the disparity in development between these established languages and the lesser-known tongues is not merely an academic concern. It is a matter of cultural survival.
Professor Ejele's emphasis on the socio-cultural implication of language lose
on the resonates deeply with us. The decline of a language once often signifies the erosion of
cultural knowledge, traditions, and identities. Witness the entire transmission of languages faltering, where parents increasingly find themselves unable to pass on their native tongue to their children. We are confronted with very grim realities that language extinction equates to cultural extinction. It is evident that although government and institutional efforts have been made, they are insufficient to address the enormity of the challenge. We all need more than just policy. We require a movement, one that actively engages in the documentation, revitalization, and promotion of their indigenous languages. So the responsibility for this lies not solely with the authorities, but primarily with the speakers of these languages and the communities that cherish them. In this regard, I echo the call to action presented by Professor Ejele. Indigenous language speakers must take the initiative to document and promote their languages, even when government support is inconsistent. We must cultivate a spirit of community collaboration, leveraging resources and knowledge to uplift our languages. Furthermore, the urgency of our situation demands that we harness education as a tool for empowerment and preservation. Incorporating local languages into formal education systems, creating orthographies for lesser-known languages, and developing targeted programs for the linguistic revitalization are very noble ideas. They are essential actions that we must prioritize. As we leave this forum today, let us commit ourselves to a united effort to preserve our linguistic heritage. Let us engage in dialogue, foster collaboration, and champion initiatives that not only celebrate our indigenous languages, but also recognize them as a vital component of our national identity. Thus, I encourage each of you to carry forward the insights gained from Professor Ejele's lecture. May we advocate for the policies and practices necessary to keep our indigenous languages alive, ensuring that future generations can inherit the rich cultural tapestry that makes the Nigerian languages unique. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we please rise once more in standing ovation to this erudite 193 inaugural lecturer of the unique University of Port Harcourt, Professor Philomena Ejele. You must agree with me that this is a 5-star presentation. Please do it better. If you're clapping, clap better for her. Thank you. Thank you.
We'd like to thank everyone who found time to be here today to rejoice with the family of Professor Philomena Ejele. And of course, anything that has a beginning must definitely have an end. We thank you very much. Now listen to this announcement. This one was the 193rd inaugural lecture. And for the 194th inaugural lecture, it's going to be presented by a very distinguished professor, Professor Femi Okiremute Shaka, Faculty of Communication and Media Studies, University of Port Harcourt, and the topic of the lecture is Nollywood, Cinema, Social Identity and Self-Representation. It will hold on Thursday, 17th October 2024. The venue is here, CBN Center of Excellence, University of Port Harcourt. You are respectfully, specially, cordially invited. Thank you very much. And as usual, as a mark of honor to our distinguished lecturer, I'm talking about Professor Ejele, Philomena Ejele, because we also have another Ejele in the house. The university has packaged a very sumptuous cocktail in honor of Professor Ejele, his immediate family, and some of her selected guests, and of course the professors that are enrobed at the venue that has been communicated to you. So immediately after now, after the closing formalities, we are going to take a group photograph, which is going to hold at the entrance to this auditorium. So please, we'd like everyone to please comply with our directive. I've been told that special food has been prepared for everyone. The student will be seated. While your elder brothers, I'm talking about our guest, special guest seated here, we go through this other door and you're going to be given that very special, sumptuous package prepared by the family of our 193rd inaugural lecturer. Very sweet food. Thank you very much. May I respectfully, at this point in time, invite us to rise on our feet to bring this occasion to a close. We will begin with the university anthem, and the last will be the national anthem. Please, as we sing, let us be at a place as a mark of honor. No movement. Thank you.